All right, folks, this is exciting because from time to time we get to lasso some of our leaders here at Ramsey Solutions, come in the studio with us and give you some perspective on what you've heard from our feature conversation. Really excited to have Luke LeFevre here. He's become a good friend. He's our executive creative director. So this is a guy that when he came on board here was in the weeds creating and now leading creative. So we thought this would be a really fun perspective. Welcome to the EntreLeadership studio,
for having
Luke.
me. This is amazing.
It's a little intimidating to have an executive creative director in the studio because I saw you when you walked in, you were doing this number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gray and the
Once a creative, always a creative. I love it. I love it. So I want to ask you first.
Yeah.
What has the transition been like? What comes to top of mind as you go from being one of the creatives, and you were in leadership role, but then moving into...
I wasn't at the beginning.
No, but you've been in it for a little while. Mm-hmm. So you've gone from creating, a little bit of leading, more leading, now true leadership, pure leadership position. What's that been like for you?
It's been a long process, more like a dimmer switch versus a light switch that flipped. And it actually was easier than I thought it would be because I was never in love with like design as a craft. I started as a web designer and did web design, but I also loved being in bands and I also loved public speaking and all of those things. So I was okay letting go of the design after a while.
Sure.
But at the beginning, it was like I knew what I had in my head, and so I'd take the work and I'd get it to where I needed to go, and then a slow process over time of letting go of a little bit. How did they do? Letting go of a little bit more, till now someone who really loves design or content or video is way better at it than I am. I'm better at finding, and I always say my job is really finding and getting the right people in the right seats so that we can do good work.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was it like in the early days when you realized, okay, now I'm going to move into a role where I'm leading creatives?
Yeah.
Did you come at it and go, okay, this is kind of interesting because I feel like I know how I wanted to be led. I know how others like me wanted to. Did you have a couple of little philosophical things that you said, okay, this is what I'm going to do now that I'm leading?
I didn't have too many from here because I really liked my leaders here. That I didn't have any of those things, well, I'm not going to do it like so-and-so.
Yeah.
Let's see, out of the gate.
Or that you were going to do it different. Not so much that they didn't do it right, but you're going, okay, I'm coming at it this way because I think this might work.
At the beginning, it was very much about, so I was a designer first, so I did lots of web ads for FPU, did tons of ads, and it was the realization over time that what you're putting into your head comes out into your work. So I would learn that as a designer, so if I was listening to like, I'll get to your question there in a second, but I was listening to like super sad, depressing music, and I would, because I just love it. I love like acoustic-y, fall, sad music. But then the ads I was working on were like super dark blue and angst-ridden like fighting pictures and clouds of struggle of people getting out of debt and all this stuff. And so once the creative director I had at the time, what he did was, here's to answer your question. He brought me into his office one time and he pulled out all the ads I'd worked at over the year. And he goes, Luke, we're supposed to be about hope and joy, and you're giving us sadness and struggle.
Right.
And once he kind of pointed that out to me, I was like, oh, I got to get my head in the right place to get to the right work. Then when I started leading people, I was very concerned about where their heads were at.
Oh, that's good.
Emotionally, so that they could put out the right kind of work. So that's something I took from one of my leaders up to that point. And then it was really about, at the beginning, it wasn't immediately about leading people. It was, in my brain, this is my vision for this big campaign or this big project. And then over time, it turned into leading the people because I had to scale it somehow.
Sure.
And get those people in the right places. But immediately, my brain didn't go there as it probably should have.
Right.
But,
well, it's an organic development there. Okay. So we've heard from Todd Henry talk about how he sees it as very different in leading creatives. I'm sure you agree. But just from your world, Luke LeFevre, what would you say to those who are listening right now who have to lead creatives? They've heard some great stuff from Todd, but just from your personal experience, what one thing would you share about leading creatives?
To people who are not creative.
To those who are, to who are leading creatives, whether they consider themselves creative. Because here's the point that Todd and I made, and I think you agree with this. I think everybody's creative.
I do too, absolutely.
I think it's a cop-out and a bunch of hogwash. Well, I'm not creative.
Right. Even if you don't consider yourself a creative, but you have a writer or a videographer or a designer of some sort, don't dismiss what it is they do. So a lot of business people are like, I don't know, just make it pretty. But there's a lot more to it than that. So acknowledge what that is, because they put their hearts into it. So lead them like that. Like, let them own that stuff. In the vein of everyone is creative, I agree. What one thing would I tell someone to do to lead creatives better is to make sure you're leading yourself better. I know that's something we talk about here, and that how to lead you when you're not in charge book. But really, if you are spending time, quiet time, listening, learning, reading in the mornings before you get to work, and processing what you think and what you think it should be before the day's emails and texts and everything starts coming in, you will lead your people so much better if you have some quiet, focused time in the morning to read and write and process what you're going through. That's the one thing.
I love that, because I think it's so true to be healthy yourself. Because one of the things you said just a few minutes earlier that I thought was great is you got to make sure whatever the project is or the vision is that you and your team are taking on creatively for a much bigger vision, right, for the company as a whole. You want to get their heads in the right space. And how can you do that if your head is in the wrong space? Really good. Something I hear you talk about a lot, I'd love for you to expound on a little bit, and just a little bit of our time we have remaining is blank space. How do you use that? What is blank space?
Well, blank space for me is, so I've just at the new year, I already get up pretty early. I normally get up at 5, and I have make tea or coffee or something in the morning, and then I'll read to get my head in a good space, and then I'll journal. I write a lot. I write, I just free form stream of consciousness, right? Like, I try not to filter what my brain's doing, because I don't want to be like, oh, that's dumb, or don't think that. I just give myself that freedom in the morning. So since the first of the year, I've been trying 4 a.m.
Whoa.
And today it was 4:20,
What's the reason for the extra time?
Because I felt as though, I try to get to work at 8. I felt as though the time I had without anything to do in the morning was kept creeping in. So I'd read a little of the Bible, I'd journal, I'd meditate on some of those things that I just read, and then I wanted like an hour just to start writing. And so I just want an hour where I don't really have a plan. And so the other day I just started writing. The plan is to write and see what happens. And so I just started writing, and it sort of gives you the struggle of what you're going through. And my head's thinking about this and what about this, and I come up with these 3 or 4 or 5 things I'll probably do today. And it's an hour without an agenda, but I'm wanting to see what comes out of it. And sometimes I'll just explore an idea, and I'll go search for something, and I'll Google something, or I'll watch a 10-minute talk and then go to the next thing. And it's really interesting what comes out of it. So that's that white space. If I wait to do it during the day, and I'm like, I'm going to have an hour of white space from 11 to 12, it does not happen.
I think the power in what you do, and I find the same thing for me early in the morning, is the solitude. It is amazing how loneliness and quiet are actually really good things.
It's great.
If we allow them. And then one other thing you said too that I find refreshing, and I love this about you and your leadership style, because you're very authentic to it, and that is that we don't edit thoughts. There's got to be a point in our day where we allow stuff to just roll.
Just go.
Now you can then, after it's out, you can then sift and filter and debate
files that are just it's all the things that I don't really want anybody reading. But what would happen is I processed for so long that then these things would pop out later in the day, and I'd go back and I'd reference this thing that happened in the morning, and I'd edit out all the stuff that I don't.
Here's
need
what happened.
To hear.
Tell me if you think this is right. Because this is me. I'm having my quiet time in the morning, and I also do this late at night. So I get these times where I just let things roll. It's like my visual is like a dryer. And so the thoughts are just kind of tumbling in there. Around. I have 3 kids. So as laundry's my world with my wife right now. So that's the metaphor. But when I don't get it out in the form of writing or let the thought continue,
I know where you're going.
There's a debate that happens, and so then the whole thing stops.
Or you just live in your head and it causes stress.
Yes,
For
the
me,
dryer's running all day
I get
long.
stressed and I just need to get this thing out. And finally I just vomit it out and
that's
just
good.
get it out. And then it's less stressful.
Yeah.
Or it seems so much smaller
Yeah.
than I thought it was.
Right.
And if it's a stressful thing and I write it out, you're like, oh, really? It's just like these 3 things I need to deal with. Or, man, I've got this huge idea I got to get out.
Yes.
The huge idea ends up being like 2 sentences. You're like, oh, there's really not that much meat there, you know?
I didn't know we were going to go here, but folks, I got to tell you, this is the key to being creative.
Yeah.
You can't have all this noise in your head and then expect to create something pure.
How can you have an original thought if you don't give yourself time or quiet to have a thought?
Oh, wow. So good. Well, I think we leave it there because I think it's a really haunting thought. I think it's something that we want you to wrestle with. I can tell you this guy does this. He's challenged me to do this. I've taken a form of the Luke LeFevre strategy and certainly doing that because the last thing I want to do early in the mornings is write. Now, I'm thinking and I'm reading and I'm going. I mean, I've got lots of thoughts.
You got to slow down.
But he's exactly right. The idea of writing allows for the best thought to come out. And then the other great thing is to look back on it.
Oh, man.
To look back on it and go, look for growth, look for patterns, look for things that were emerging. It's just really a great exercise.
When you do that and you look back at the year, you're then like, oh, that's what that year was about. And then imagine 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
And then 10 years, you'll be like, oh my gosh, that's what that decade was about. And there's a quote, I think it's Richard Rohr who says it, and he says, one day we'll realize what we've been doing while we've been doing what we've been doing.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Wow.
And if you're journaling, you can look back and see what was actually going on. So.
Wow. That's incredible stuff. Luke, thanks for being with us, man.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.